it is very difficult to assemble an audience like this. And so I am particularly thankful to the Shastra University and the Hindu for presenting an audience which actually raises the level of the speakers. I hope that audience decides both the content and the quality of the speech. And I am extremely happy, despite the fact that Ram has been far more aggressive and determinative than Mr. Yechury. Conclusive, judgmental. This is a dialogue. A dialogue is a process where there is an Indian attitude to dialogue, which is called Purvapaksha. That is the Indian Tarka Shastra. You study the other person's viewpoint first before being determinative about it. In fact, I didn't want to talk about the idea of cultural nationalism or Hindu Rashtra or Hindu nationalism, because I had come prepared to talk about something which is far more relevant today, the idea of Indian economic development. That is the first point I wanted to talk. But I don't know whether I should talk on what Ram forcing me into talking or what I wanted to talk. See, basically, all of us are arrested by the context. We are arrested by the context. We should take note of the context, but should not be arrested by the context, because the contexts are trivial, transitory, so impermanent. For example, take what happened to the world in the last 50 years or 60 years. And I will take you to immediately what I consider as the progress in the economic thinking of the world, which is quite amazing. In the year 1951, the United Nations gave a kind of a direction to the underdeveloped nations as to how they can develop and what they should do if they have to develop. And it is such today to consider it is a despicable way of handling the world and different countries in the world. And this was based on the Western anthropological modernity, which we are celebrating today as modernity. This was a book published by Princeton University. On 20th January 1949, Harry Truman, he announced how the world will move forward. In that address, he said that the world will move forward in the American way, in substance. And Princeton University put it together. Don't think it is some kind of a personal opinion. There is a whole lot of thought and thoughtful institutions behind it. And the Princeton University quoted what the United Nations said at the time. This is what the Western nations, through the United Nations, told the underdeveloped nations. There is a sense in which rapid economic progress is impossible without painful adjustments. Ancient philosophies have to be scrapped. Old social institutions have to disintegrate. Bonds of caste, creed, and race have to burst. Large number of persons who cannot keep up with progress have to have their expectations of comfortable life frustrated. Very few communities are willing to pay the full price for economic progress. United Nations Department of Social and Economic Affairs, 1951. This is 2 years after Harry Truman spoke. Then Princeton University says the report suggested no less than a total restructuring of underdeveloped societies. The statement quoted earlier might seem to us today amazingly ethnocentric, arrogant, and at best naive. Yet what has to be explained is precisely the fact that it was uttered and it made perfect sense. Tell me, will anyone here, the modernists, the secularists, and the people who look to the West, will disagree with this statement that there is a sense in which rapid economic progress is possible unless ancient philosophies are scrapped, old social institutions disintegrate, bonds of caste, creed have to burst? All of us are agreed on this, isn't it? This is what guided the world till 2005. There has to be a transcultural, political, economic, geopolitical approach to development. This was based on Western anthropological modernity, in which I see no difference between either Mr. Yechuri or Mr. Manmohan Singh. And I am going to establish how the whole thought process changed on its own in the year 2005, when the G20 nations amazingly completely went back upon it. G20 nations constitute the people who direct the economic discourse in the world. The U-turn came, the central bank governors and G20 nations declared in October 2005. We note that development approaches are evolving over time and thus need to be updated as economic challenges unfold. We will continue to review G20 according to sharing our experiences in implementation. We recognized that there is no uniform development approach that fits all countries. This was the reversal of both the Marxian approach as well as the approach of globalization, that every country will have to work out its own model. There is no fit-all approach for development. Each country should be able to choose the developmental approaches and policies that best suits a specific characteristic while benefiting from the accumulated experience over the last decades, including the importance of macroeconomic policies for sustained growth. There was not one echo of this declaration by the world leaders in the Indian discourse. The Indian discourse continued as it is in the Western anthropological modernity, as which defined our economic progress, whether it was in the socialist era or in the liberalization era. Later in May 2008, just ahead of the global meltdown, the World Bank said, in our work across the World Bank has learned the hard way that there is no one model that fits all. Development is all about transformation, taking the best ideas, testing them in new situations, and throwing away what does not work. It means, above all, the ability to recognize when we have failed. It is never an easy thing to do. It is even more difficult for an organization to do it. All governments or the World Bank, which constantly need to adopt the changing nature of the development challenge. So the World Bank also came to the conclusion that there is no fit-all model for development. But what is the model for development? The United Nations, which in the year 2010 that there is only one model for development, you have to throw away our past, go on a new developmental paradigm that will put you on the escalator for growth. The United Nations said in the year 2010, development must be nationally driven, rejecting one-size-fits-all approach to eradicate poverty and foster economic growth. In the year 2013, as Mr. Supandas Gupta said, culture is the basic drive of development. This is what the United Nations accepted. That is for setting the millennium goals. I am going to read out to you something. It is not enough to set global targets for all. We need to adapt a change. To mobilize people, we need to understand and embrace their culture. This means encouraging dialogue, listen to individual voices, ensuring that culture and human rights inform the new course for sustainable development. The UN report also said the UN officials today highlighted the need to recognize the vital role of culture in poverty reduction and sustainable growth, and to ensure that it is integrated into the post-2005 development agenda. It's a very vast kind of discourse which goes on. I don't want to read it. All that I want to say is that the Western anthropological modernity which governs the Indian discourse, which governs all that is spoken here, is not the future way of looking at the world in the economic sense. Culture is so important. Our traditions are so important. Our value systems are so important that we cannot reject all this, throw all this as useless, and hold on to something which is still a very much an amateur product of the West-centric modernity, about which I want to say, where even our constitution, about which we have spoken so much, Bommai's judgment was quoted, and to say that Hinduism means religion and majoritarianism means Hindu rule, these are all the kind of discourse that take place while we are saying what is secularism, what is majoritarian, what is minoritarian. As Supandas Gupta rightly said, if there was no majoritarianism, we are perfectly happy. But are we to say that there is no minoritarianism in this country? The entire politics of this country runs on minoritarianism. Secularism is equated to minority rights. It is no more equal treatment of all religions. There is a special treatment for minority religion. That is what produces majority reaction. It will continue to produce majority reaction unless you address the root cause of what is nationalism. Then it takes us to what is nationalism. Ram was very vehement on what is Hindu Rashtra, what is Hindutva, what is Hinduism. I am going to read out the very Supreme Court judgment. It is not one judgment, it is a series of judgments in which how the idea of India, how the idea of Hinduism, Hindutva has been looked at by constitutional court, before which all arguments have been made, all political parties appeared. Everything started with a judgment of the Supreme Court in 1957, if I remember, 78, if I remember right, a constitution bench judgment, whether Nicola Sundaram is a Hindu under the Hindu law. This is the point. You see how the court so beautifully dealt with this matter. This is quoted in the Hindutva judgment. It is putting together all the views of the Supreme Court on what constitutes Hinduism, Hindutva, and Indian cultural nationalism. That is also law. It quotes the Encyclopedia Britannica. Unfortunately, no Indian author will be quoted to make the point acceptable. We have to quote the Encyclopedia Britannica. Hinduism has been defined in the Encyclopedia Britannica as a civilization. And it goes on as a civilization, as a religion. Hinduism is an utterly diverse conglomerate of doctrines, cults, and way of life. In principle, note these points. Hinduism incorporates all forms of belief and worship without necessitating the selection or elimination of any. Can there be a better definition for secularism? Can there be a better definition for secularism? If India is not Hindu, it would never have been secular. The Hindu is inclined to revere the divine in every manifestation, whatever it may be. It is whether it is river or mountains or stones or anything. He only sees divine in it. The entire manifestation is divine. Ishavashyamidam sarvam. You look at the entire, you only see God. You may or may not agree with it, but can you deny the expansiveness of the thought? And leaving both Hindus and non-Hindus, whatever creed and worship practices suit them the best. A Hindu may embrace a non-Hindu religion without ceasing to be a Hindu. Encyclopedia Britannica, quoted by the Supreme Court with approval. And since the Hindu is disposed to think synthetically and to regard other forms of worship, strange gods, diverse in doctrines, as inadequate or rather than wrong or objectionable, let us assume if there is a situation, if there is New Year's Day, it has nothing to do with Hindu, but we all go to temples. One more God, one more way of worship. We have no issue. The core of the religion does not even depend on the existence or non-existence of God or whether there is one God or many. Tell me, you classify it as religion and say anyone who expounds this thought is a religious bigot, he is communal, anti-secular. Where will the country stand if you ignore such an expansive idea? You say, if you are contravening this idea of Hindu, you are wrong. This is what the Supreme Court said. You know, the Supreme Court judgment on Hindutva quoted the Ayodhya judgment of Justice Bharucha and himself and Justice Ahmadi. What do they say? Hinduism is a tolerant faith. What does that mean? What about the other faiths? Why you attach the word tolerance to Hinduism, you know? It is doctrinally tolerant. A Hindu as a person is as intolerant as a Muslim or Christian in person. It is the doctrine which makes him tolerant. That is the reference point. If the doctrine says, come on, I have to convert you, otherwise my religious personality is not fulfilled, then you are intolerant. That is the difference between Abrahamic faiths and Hinduism. Unless you recognize it, you cannot define Indian secularism. It cannot be put on par. Hinduism cannot be put on par with Abrahamic religions. Unless you understand it, we cannot define Indian secularism. We cannot understand it. Secularism does not mean equal disrespect to all religions. It is equal respect to all religions, which means religions must mutually respect each other. That is the duty of the constitutions to ensure, polity to ensure, public life to ensure, media to ensure, intellectuals to ensure that each religion must respect each other. That is the Indian definition of secularism. But has the politics in India, politicians in India, political parties in India ever attempted this? You must respect others, but what others do to you, you should not bother, because that is secularism. Ordinarily, it is this tolerance that has enabled Islam, Christianity, Zoroastrianism, Judaism, Buddhism, Jainism and Sikhism to find their shelter and support this land. I will immediately take you to a brochure which was issued by the Israeli Consulate General in the year 1967 about Jews, Indian Jews in Israel. The editor noted that Jews from all over the world came from 108 countries to rebuild the Israel nation. From 107 nations they came, maimed, beaten, butchered. Only from one country they came, recalling their best experiences. That is India. The Parsis came here, we welcomed them. There was no Article 29 at that time. There was no secularism at that time. It is the whole approach that everybody, we made Parsis into a caste. We made Jews into a caste. The Cochin king gave the plot next to his temple for the Jews to build their synagogue and told them, you should not be affected by our way of life. He gave them a principality to rule themselves. Who came and attacked them? It is the Dutch people. It is the Portuguese people. Because they were supposed to have crucified Christ. They carried that enmity from there and attacked them here. It is the Mohammedan kings who defended them. What are we talking? Where is the depth in the Indian debate? Where is the depth in comparing what is Hinduism and what is Abrahamic religions? Where is the religious target here? There is no doctrinal target against any religion in India. If at all, the Hinduism goes as far as to say, we don't know what is the truth. Against the determinative truth, this is the truth, you have to fall in line, otherwise you will be a kafir or heathen. That is not religion. So I feel that this debate lacks depth. We need to have a debate on what is Hinduism, what is Abrahamic religions. I am willing for a debate. I would like Mr. Yechuri or Ram to come for that debate. I want Shastra to make that. I want to make Shastra to make this as the part of debate. Is Hinduism consistent with Indian secularism? Is the doctrine of Hinduism consistent with Indian secularism? Is the doctrine of Islam consistent with Indian secularism? Is the doctrine of Christianity consistent with Indian secularism? I am willing for a debate. Thank you very much. There are many other points to be said, but the time is over. Thank you very much.